As we remember the life of Rosalynn Carter, we want to take a look back at her at her time as First Lady.
What do you think the public perception of Rosalynn Carter is?
I don't know. It's probably what people like you say. She's a steel magnolia. But it's not because I am.
That was 60 Minutes newsman Morley Safer trying to get Rosalynn Carter to account for her nickname, the Steel Magnolia, in 1979, a couple of years into her husband's term. Here to discuss Mrs. Carter's legacy of service is Anita McBride. She is director of the First Ladies Initiative at the American University and co-author of the book, U.S. First Ladies, Making History and Leaving Legacies. She also served as Chief of Staff to First Lady Laura Bush from 2005 to 2009. Anita, it's very good to see you. First, let's put Rosalynn Carter in her time period. Edith Wilson ran the White House after her husband's stroke. Eleanor Roosevelt gave speeches and tips to her husband and wrote newspaper columns. Betty Ford was public about her thoughts on abortion, premarital sex, and other things her husband maybe didn't want her to talk about. And then comes Rosalynn Carter. Take it from there.
Right. Yes, thank you, John. It was a time of profound change for women in our country. And Mrs. Carter, first of all, came to the White House already being a full partner to her husband. She campaigned for him for governor. She served alongside of him as an active First Lady of Georgia. She intended to be a full partner in the White House as well. And she profoundly changed the office of First Lady. I mean, honestly, we have her to thank for expanding and formalizing the office of First Lady. Every First Lady that followed her benefited from the structure she helped to put in place. And what is so interesting about how she was able to do that is that her husband campaigned precisely on cutting the size of the White House staff, yet she was successful in really expanding the role and being very active in so many issues of the Carter presidency. She liked politics. She was a great campaigner and a great partner to the work of the president.
As someone who has experienced firsthand experience on the sensitivities. Time magazine's Hugh Sidey wrote that during Carter's term that Mrs. Carter was the second most powerful person in the United States. Right. Explore the sensitivities of that in
Sure.
her time. Was that a help or a hindrance at the time?
Well, yes, no, great question. And, really remarkable of the boundaries that she pushed in her time as First Lady. She sat in on cabinet meetings. We know that. I mean, she attended working lunches with the president, met with him, carrying her briefcase of her notes and her work to meet with the president. Did she face some criticism at the time? Sure, but nothing really what Mrs. Clinton faced even years later. It was Mrs. Carter, or her personality, the support that the president gave her, the judgment that he trusted. One early thing happened in the Carter administration that she did, that the president sent her to Latin America, and she studied up. She learned Spanish. She met with all of those leaders. She was told by the State Department, you won't be successful in doing this. This is a macho environment. Yet when she returned, her visit was so successful. Even the president's pollster told the president that this resonated with 70% of the American people, thought that she did a great job on that trip. And she opened up doors for American diplomats with dictators all over Latin America that they had difficulty meeting with and that needed to present the president's policies to them. That is the profound legacy of how she supported the Carter presidency.
You mentioned those formal lunches they had, which were, in reading about them, quite formal, and you also said that she had 200 pages of notes from the 1978 Israel-Egypt peace accords at Camp David. In the work you did, seeing those notes, what was it like seeing world events through her eyes?
Yes, this is really remarkable. Of course, we know she was involved in helping the president on those very, intense negotiations at Camp David. between Egypt and Israel. And she took extemporaneous notes during that time and the reflections of her husband's thoughts. I mean, she experienced, as she said in her memoirs, the seesaw of emotions that they felt during those 12 intense days. And those notes ended up being 200 typed pages that really are a reflection, undoubtedly the most human account of that period of time and that signature event in the Carter presidency.
And Anita, as a final question, I understand you met Mrs. Carter a few times in the 40 years after she left the White House, and in your personal interactions with her. What sticks out to you as you reflect on her life?
How much she was still so dedicated to all of the issues that she was working on, whether it was childhood immunizations, of which she had a profound impact in this country, and the protocols that the Centers for Disease Control established in the 70s for kids. She had a great interest, of course, in all of her human rights work and in her mental health work, no doubt. I had invited her to come to New York in 2011 to meet with a group of African First Ladies that I was helping them establish their offices in their countries. And she talked to them about being devoted and dedicated and passionate about issues that they cared about, and that they needed to stick with it to really make a difference. And she was a great example of that in her White House life and in her post-White House life.
Anita McBride, director of the First Ladies Initiative at the American University. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.